Fox News alert. North Korea just fired a ballistic missile that flew over Japan before crashing into the Pacific Ocean. The launch is yet another escalation to the crisis and comes just days after the United Nations passed a new set of strict sanctions against North Korea. For details, let's bring in Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry, affectionately known as the Six.
Good to see you, Dana. Even though Greg doesn't like me, I like all of you. The bottom line is this is a serious, tense situation here at the White House tonight. We've just gotten a statement from the U.S. Pacific Command in Hawaii. They are taking the lead on this. The U.S. military declaring tonight that there was no threat to North America or to Guam. Important to note, but also saying they are monitoring this closely because, as you reported, this missile flew over Japan, our key ally in the region. President Trump also was, in fact, briefed on the situation by his chief of staff, General John Kelly. Also monitoring this tonight is the Defense Secretary, James Mattis. Remember, he recently warned North Korea it would be annihilated if the U.S. military used its war plans. We're hearing that as this missile was launched, Mattis and the head of U.S. nuclear forces, they were talking to reporters, and the interview ended abruptly with the general asking staff, did something happen? Well, what happened is the North Korean dictator, Kim Jong-un, launched an intermediate-range ballistic missile. He launched it eastward from North Korea. It flew over the territory of northern Japan before landing in the Pacific Ocean. This missile's flight distance is key. It was about 2,300 miles. Significant because that means Guam is now in North Korea's range with a missile like this. It's also an in-your-face move because, as you noted, it comes just days after the U.S. rallied the UN Security Council to pass tough new sanctions against North Korea, led by Ambassador Nikki Haley there. The president warned in recent days that even tougher sanctions may be coming, and next Tuesday the president himself will be at the UN delivering his first ever speech to the General Assembly in New York, where North Korea, of course, will be front and center. And tonight, the U.S. Pacific Command is declaring that our defense of Japan and South Korea is, quote, ironclad, and that the U.S. is ready to, quote, defend ourselves and our allies from any attack or provocation. So that from the U.S. military tonight, which is watching all of this very closely, Dana.
All right, Ed, thank you so much for that report. Now for our top story tonight, President Trump causing all sorts of controversy by saying he's working on a deal with Democrats that enhances border security and allows dreamers, illegal immigrants brought to the U.S. as children, to stay in the country. Conservatives are upset that the deal doesn't include funding for President Trump's border wall, but Mr. Trump says the wall still will eventually be built.
Very important is the wall to me, and we have to know that the wall will not be obstructed, because without the wall, I wouldn't do anything. We are looking for extreme border security and surveillance, everything else. We also have to get the wall. It doesn't have to be here, but they can't obstruct the wall, whether it's in a budget or something else. We're not looking at citizenship. We're not looking at amnesty. We're looking at allowing people to stay here. We're working with everybody, Republican. We're working with Democrat. I just spoke with Paul Ryan. He's on board. Everybody's on board.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat, doesn't have any sympathy for those upset about the wall funding.
In fact, I listened to Fox News this morning. I'm starting to do that, to see what's going on over there. And they keep saying the president promised a wall in the campaign. Yeah, he also promised that Mexico would pay for it. Where's Mexico? They've said 12 times they're not paying for it. That's not the promise he made.
All right, so all day we've been hearing about this, talking about it. And if you listen closely, Kimberly, one of the things President Trump said is, with this discussion you have with the Democrats, that they couldn't obstruct something that might be somewhere else, not in the DACA bill, but like in a budget. And in fact, the House, at least, has passed border funding. It is in the budget proposal as we speak. So maybe that's what President Trump was saying, is that he can get the DACA deal done and also get the wall funded at the same time, perhaps.
It was a little bit of a heavy signal.
I thought so.
Yeah, right? I mean, I got it. So I think that's what he's trying to do. And look, he's trying to be a clever negotiator and a businessman and say, okay, I'm going to sit down with them because I need a little something, you know, from the left and from the Democrats. This is something that's important to them. This is going to add value. Then they're going to owe me. He needs to be able to reach across the party lines, like we've talked about, to get this support, because he has very, thin support to get something over the hurdle legislatively, as we have seen by the repeated attempts as it relates to health care and other things. So immigration, you mentioned earlier on Special Report, may be the one thing that he's really able to, jump across, get to the other side. But on the flip side, a lot of his hardcore supporters, despite some more broad-based Republican support, are not happy with this. They think that this is a sidestep away and abandoning the principles that he campaigned on, and they tie the wall in. But he doesn't want them to lose faith because he's saying, listen to me, I'm going to take care of the wall. I still intend to do it. Don't get distracted by the machinations of, Schumer and Pelosi. We're going to do part of a deal with them, and I got a clever way to get it in elsewhere.
I think that is a possibility. What do you think, Greg?
Well, I think I was looking at Twitter and I was watching people burning their hats. And I just think you got to relax. For the base, this is your first tiff. It's a young relationship. Sometimes newlyweds get in a big fight, but it's too soon and nothing really bad has happened yet. And I know there was a mention that there was funding, but not for the wall. You don't know that. That funding could go to the wall. It could.
The border funding is in the House budget.
Yeah.
It's already passed.
And think about what DACA is. There was no way he was going to send them back. So instead of writing it off, he turned it into something of value that he used as a trade. So basically, he traded away something that he really didn't have to trade. So that was kind of a nice little trick that you do. It's kind of like when a kid, for his birthday, takes his dad to the store and he wants these $200 pair of shoes, but he knows his dad doesn't want to pay that, so he points at the $1,200 bike, and the dad goes, you're not getting that. And he goes, well, how about these shoes? And the dad goes, yeah, it's something a smart kid does. There's a couple other things. Number one, he still has to make a deal. If he cuts chain migration, if he gets E-Verify, if he gets money and builds a wall or part of a wall or something of a wall, it's a pretty good deal. But the bigger thing is, and what he did, the big picture, the idea of building the wall created a shift in the conversation. I'm not saying he created the conversation immigration. We were talking about it on the 5 for 5 years. That's where he got a lot of it. But he forced the media to confront an entire population who were unhappy about the border. That's what he did. We didn't do that. He did that. It also helped him win. The build the wall as a meaning, which is enhanced border protection, was one of the 3 legs of that table, which was law. Of the table of law and order, it was immigration, police, and national security. That's what got him in. So in the big picture, it got him a win. Created a shift in the conversation. If he could do this deal, he's a winner.
I agree that it's a combination, Jesse, of these things, of border security, more enforcement. But I do think when he said, I'm going to build a wall, he described it and how it was going to look. And all of the chants at all the rallies was build the wall and who's going to pay for it? Mexico's going to pay for it. And that was the big rallying cry. So I can see why some people would be upset, even though they probably still are going to support him.
Yeah, if the wall doesn't get built, Waters World is not going to be happy. And I think a lot of the base is going to be very displeased. That was the centerpiece of his campaign.
It wasn't just the metaphor.
It wasn't. And you know what? The wall is a metaphor, too, because if you can't get that done and you ran on that and you're a builder and that's your major policy initiative, then what have you got to run on and for re-election if there's no wall? So that has to be done. The DACA deal, the base freaking out a little bit about that. I understand that. It's not amnesty, though. He's not delivering a pathway to citizenship. If there is amnesty for the Dreamers, people are going to have a hard time stomaching that. I support DACA, but if they cut in line and they're delivered amnesty, I'm going to have a hard time dealing with that. I think a lot of people are, too. I think what Nancy and Crying Chuck did was they came out and they spun the dinner and put the president on the defensive while he was in Florida today.
Yes, you always want to be the first to define your meeting.
That's right. In the swamp, then this rule number 1 of the swamp, get out of the meeting, go to the microphones first. And that's what they did. They said, we have a deal on DACA and the border wall funding is off the table. The president had to come out and say, there is no deal and we're going to fund the wall later. I understand what he's doing with the wall funding by not linking it to DACA because no Democrat is going to vote to fund the wall. I just don't see it. It's an invitation to be primaried only there, and that's going to be hard. Because if you're a Democrat and you vote to fund the border wall, your opponent primaries you and says, Congressman so-and-so, Democrat, voted to fund the racist border wall that Trump wants. You're done in that primary. So I don't think there's a chance. It has to come in a big, omnibus bill and a cliff-hanging debt ceiling situation on Christmas Eve. That's the only way it's happening.
Sneak attack.
Juan, what do you think from the Democrats' perspective?
Well, I think the Democrats, first of all, think they got a good deal here. I mean, they're working with the president. He wants to work with them. I don't know if you saw this, but Chuck Schumer's on the floor talking, and he gets picked up on a hot mic, and he says basically he likes us. It was like, she likes me. Anyway, he likes us, and that you've got to take a step left and a step right. Otherwise, you get boxed in, says Schumer. I think that right now, though, the reality is I don't give much credence to the idea that the wall is funded in anybody's budget. I don't think that's really going to happen at the moment. It may down the road. I could be wrong. But I think what I give credence to is the idea that Steve King says this is going to blow up his President Trump's base. Or Ann Coulter says, well, who doesn't want Trump impeached at this point? Because she's now knows that the left wants him out. She wants him out because he's not living up to the promise that Jesse articulated. What interests me is the actual legislation on the floor. Democrats are proposing a vote on the DREAM Act. So that's what they're putting in front of Trump. Republicans, on the other hand, have something called Recognizing America's Children. Now, what's the big difference? The big difference is that the DREAM Act will give you conditional residency, which is a pathway to citizenship. What about the Republican plan? You have to apply for that conditional residency, but it's still a pathway to citizenship. So you can imagine Steve Bannon at Breitbart just saying, this is, a free pass.
This is amnesty. And the president said on tape today, no amnesty. We haven't talked about amnesty.
Yeah, well.
So hearing that is troubling.
I think it is troubling. But I will say this. I was surprised to read that Mark Meadows, who's head of the Freedom Caucus, said, we don't have to vote on a wall for a wall's sake. It's like he wasn't heavily invested. I know that Senator McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, not heavily invested. Paul Ryan, not heavily invested. They don't even want to vote on the thing.
Right.
All right. What would you have said on the campaign instead of building a wall? What would have been what would have been more, as a promise? You know what I mean?
Strong borders.
Well, do you think strong? But everybody says strong borders. The reason why he won is that he didn't say strong borders or enhanced border security. He said build a wall. That could mean all of those things. But he said it that way because it resonated.
Do you think that's what he really meant when he talked? He talked about actual physical construction of the wall, and they actually have. They have called in contractors to come in and give plans for what that actual physical structure would look like.
Yeah, I think he
but
is.
You're saying that he didn't mean that.
No, I'm saying because you guys are saying that he promised this and people are going to be upset. I'm saying that it was a visual promise. For example, in a fairy tale, you say they lived happily ever after. You don't say they lived to the age of 83 after a series of debilitating illnesses. You say something that is visual and it catches you. And then you worry about it later. I think that's what he did.
Here's how I know Trump's heavily invested in building the wall, because I looked at the prototypes, these 8 contracts. One of the requirements has to be aesthetically pleasing from the American side. You know Trump wants it to be aesthetically pleasing.
And
then who's complaining?
No one.